Thank you guys for joining us. I wanted to have a nice little conversation with you today. My name's Ben Schmerler. I'm the co-host of Tech Done Different for ITSPmagazine. We're here at Broadcast Alley at RSA conference, and I want to have a nice lively chat with a couple of really smart guys about security and dealing with security in a time where the threats are so diverse and the expertise needed is so challenging. So before I get into that, we'll do a couple of brief introductions, and if you don't mind, I'm going to cheat off my phone a little bit just to make sure I give everybody their proper respect. So first here we have Arvind. Arvind Mansell is a cybersecurity subject matter expert with proven ability to design, build, and successfully implement global cybersecurity and risk programs for Fortune 30 firms, including Citigroup, Experian, and Verizon. Thank you so much, Arvind, for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Wonderful. Yeah. We also have here Justin Beechler, and let me get your bio up.
Yeah, well, I'm happy to cover it off too.
Oh, so go for it.
I'm Director of Trust and Security at BugCrowd, kind of the externally facing technical wing, talking with enterprises, small to medium businesses, governments that are looking at kind of expanding their talent pool and plugging into kind of crowdsourcing in a variety of ways. And help them build and execute a program.
Wonderful. Well, the first important question is, how are you guys enjoying RSA so far? You learn a lot, getting a lot out of it?
Oh, it's busy.
It's busy, yeah.
It is busy.
Tons and tons of people. I was down on the vendor floor, and it was the stew. I mean, just constant things. But that's really encouraging. It's great to see the community gather. I mean, these are such challenging problems.
Well, one of the things I noticed was the amount of languages being spoken on the floor has increased. So the, kind of our world's getting smaller, right? We're kind of having to come together more and more and kind of share experiences outside of the Americas to build a little more of a global security posture.
Absolutely, I echo Justin's comment. That's exactly we are seeing too. Meeting such a diverse group of people from different parts of the world.
Yeah.
As far as going from Tokyo, Japan to meeting people from Uruguay and Argentina. So I was literally blown away, how the world is coming together and
100%.
when it comes to security.
100%. I mean, in our work, which is application security testing, we deal with teams that are all over the world. When we're coordinating with people, we work out of the United States, but we're oftentimes communicating with people in India and China and Japan, all over the planet, just to make sure we can coordinate and get things done. So anyway, let's get things started. What do you guys think are the biggest challenges we're dealing with security right now in 2023? And maybe I'll start with you, Arvind.
Oh, there are tons of challenges out there, right? There's no doubt of that. I think the challenges vary by the industry as well, right? So if you're working with, let's say, a manufacturing company, the biggest impact to the plant is your ransomware attack.
Of course.
So you want to make sure you're protected and not impacting the production lines there. But if you're working in the financial firms, you have a lot of assets that are digital.
Yeah.
So the protection of those assets, how hackers are utilizing the threats and utilizing the security defects, those becomes the different challenges. And if you're in the healthcare industry, what matters most is the patient's data that you have. So how do you deal and protect those patient's data? That becomes the challenge.
So if I had like a multiple choice question about security threats, you would just pick D and you'd pick all of the above for security challenges, right? What about you, Justin? What do you think?
So, I mean, I hate to lean on the old crutch, but I think the fact that we're introducing more things into the internet and the skill sets that we have access to and the tooling that we have as we have made progression and scalability, we're still not there, right? And so I think that's the biggest challenge is security in depth, layers of security. We're still finding opportunities to better that, and we're still introducing more risk than we're able to reduce, right?
Yeah.
That's a good point. It kind of leads into my next question. I wanted to ask, are we getting better at this? I feel like we've really spread out the technology stack. We're integrating more and more things, as you point out, more devices, IoT, et cetera. Are decision makers, CISOs, getting better at this, or is it getting more complicated, or are we just sort of treading water, do you think?
Yeah, well, I mean, I do think we are making progress. You could probably speak more specifically to the CISO side of things. Right. But I do think there are some progression. As much as we in security we like to poke holes in like all the things that can go wrong, I think when I look back at the last 10 years of security, we have made some advances. We've gotten better. There are more, we're in the application space, more modern frameworks that are building security into the actual development, right? So we are reducing some things. It's just as that gets better, we are developing new technologies that then require different risk profiles, different levels of understanding, different threat modeling, right? All of those things.
Yeah. Definitely.
So I agree with you that we are getting better.
Great.
And
all right, so we got nothing to worry about. It's fine. Go ahead.
But then you start thinking about, we are getting better at what, and then what about the attackers' landscape? Are they also getting better?
Of course.
Are they also evolving and raising the level of attacks that are coming to us?
More and more sophisticated.
So to give you an example, when we used to work with a large financial firm data center, you secure the data center, you got the perimeter, and you feel like you are not exposed to the risk as much, right? But then comes the deficiencies in data center because they were never built or designed for security.
Right.
And back in 2008, I had a consulting firm asking me that, hey, Arvind, do you think financial firms will adopt the cloud? And I was like, hell no. They are not going to, but it would be amazing if they do, because none of these gaps will exist, right?
Yeah.
So 10 years later, of course, I was proven wrong, and then also the attacks that we thought will not happen in cloud space, we have started seeing them already.
Of course.
So, while on one front we got tremendously better, moving from on-prem to the cloud solutions and providing digital business services, but on the other hand, we are more exposed as well.
Yeah.
We're kind of trading threats, right? Like we're making the technology better inherently, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the technology itself is always improving, but we're sort of trading our threats off. Instead of worrying about our on-prem solutions and securing these big data centers, now we have to think about all these third parties and all of these things that are maybe not necessarily under our direct control.
Yeah.
So I guess the question is, all these things are sort of moving out of control, moving in directions we can't control. How, and you have a lot of expertise here with your experience. How do we avoid blind spots?
Right. I mean, you can.
Right.
You can avoid the blind spot. I think the better question to ask is how do we stop things from blowing up?
Yeah.
Right. So I just finished a speaking session about how not to blow up an M&A.
Yeah.
So there's no pill to take and all of a sudden you'll be secured. So generally, the way I guide the programs is focused on 3 strategic pillars, right? So the very first one is, it's a 3R plan. The very first one is rapidly respond and recover from security incidents. You know why? Because you don't control who's going to attack you when, but you do control how you respond to that attack.
Absolutely.
How do you recover from that attack, right? And the second factor, second R, is the risk-based strategy, right? Because you can't secure everything you have today. So you have to prioritize, where am I going to put my effort first?
Yeah.
Where is the business impact the most? And where should I get most bang for the buck, right? And the third one is, third R is reduce the attack surface.
Absolutely.
And that's where you start looking at things from attacker's perspective, right? So my home, I have only one front door, right? And I keep it locked, and there are double doors, and it's fire code proof and everything else. But do we treat our companies the same way? Does our companies have a lot of security defects right on the perimeter for attackers to look at and penetrate into us? So, my approach is simple: 3R, control what you do, prioritize based on risk, and close as many doors and windows as you can.
Sounds like really like a much more broader exercise of threat modeling than maybe most people are accustomed to. Do you have any thoughts on that, Justin?
Yeah, well, and especially large enterprises that have, you have the one single door, and then someone's trying to solve a problem because there's not enough light, and it's like, oh, I just added a window to the back. It's like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Like, we need to secure that now. Like, we got to build in those processes, and be able to understand that. but prioritization and prioritization paralysis, right, is a real thing for a lot of enterprises in the government space as they're looking at a very wide attack surface. And it goes down to that base. It's like, how do we figure out what to work on first that'll give us the best bang for our buck?
Absolutely.
And that's a hard thing because the people talking at the top level are understanding risk slightly different than someone at the ground level is. So I think it's a great point.
People have competing interests too. I mean, and security extends. I think a lot of people who are at RSA think about technical security. I mean, obviously, Justin, you spent a lot of time in the bug space, but I mean, it's beyond just technical security. It's about training your people. It's about dealing with the physical space, making sure you're not, tailgated. Some of the things that happen in red teaming exercises and stuff like that. I just think it's extremely challenging, and I guess a good leader knows how to balance those interests and play. I guess it's a little bit of a political game almost to make sure it happens.
Well, it gets back a little bit to your point about the speed of the attackers learning and growing and becoming more sophisticated. We tend to get in the mode on the defensive side of understanding what the different attacks are, what the risks associated with those are, and sometimes we don't go as wide as we need to. We don't get the outside-in perspective of, I can try and get through that front door, or like I'm super creative, I can go around the side, And there's kind of adversarial groups out there that are sharing this information, and they're sharing like how to get around, and that same knowledge sharing, I don't think is happening quite to that extent on the defender side of the house, right?
So I just want to add to what Justin said, and I think it was beautiful that we sitting inside the organizations, we think we know everything we need to know, right? And we bring in those shiny tools and technologies, and we scan the hell out of the infrastructure and applications and fixing all the defects, but we forget that's the view that's coming from inside to inside only. What we are missing is exactly what you said, the attacker's perspective. So how do we know, what do I have externally? How do we know what are attackers seeing there? And how do we engage in a community way that, hey, it's not related to the company, but just find all the bugs that I have, right? Just find all the defects that you're seeing to make my people get more educated and trained and be better at that part. I think that's the next stage. So to your part earlier, are we getting better? Absolutely, we are getting better, but attackers are improving too, and that's why the mindset we have to shift into is, what are attackers seeing? Whether it is from the infrastructure side or from application side, and how are they trying to break in? And how do we secure ourselves from there? So I think that's one of the key points to look at.
We talk a lot about the importance of independent third parties when it comes to things like pen testing and the white box security assessments that we do at ISE. And the fact of the matter is that you can have amazing security teams or really great developers, people who are at the top of their class, but the reality is we are all humans, we are inherently flawed, we also have biases towards our own things. Our baby couldn't possibly have any issues. It's our wonderful thing, we built it, we've spent all this time on it, but the reality is you need that outside perspective, otherwise you're going to miss something.
I completely agree with you, and that takes us to a journey, right? So when you start looking at the journey, it always starts with, what business are we in? How do we make money? Are we more of a services business or are we more of a product business? If you're in a services business, what are the competing differentiators we have? And how do we address any potential gaps there? A large, Big Four consulting firm providing security services to the community got breached. So that has an impact on the reputation. So similarly, if you're building on the product side, and if you have products that are getting out there, they could be, it reminds me of Mirai attack. It's something as simple as a white label product attack can spread across the industry and impact different towers and out there. So it's super critical to have that external view an external talent to try to break into things with the attacker's mindset. Otherwise, we are living in our own la-la land, thinking we are secure, but are we truly secure?
Absolutely. Yeah. So you brought up talent. I really want to talk about that. You mentioned, you were guys talking earlier about all the diverse people here and the different perspectives that people have. I really want to key on it. The theme of the conference is Stronger Together. I couldn't agree more with that sentiment. But we also have a reality, which is it's really hard to find good people in this. You could build a great team, but you're always going to need more people. How do we start? How do we find the talent?
It is a really, it's both a simple and a complicated math problem. Right. You have a certain number of things to secure, and the makeup of all those things and the disciplines required to test all of those things to compete with external threats, it's hard to find that talent and bring that talent in-house. You need to go and search out the talent, right? And so it really becomes how do you scale that, right? How do you benefit from different, experiences and disciplines and skill sets? And I think that's what a lot of, where we get a little bit stuck is you can make some key hires to secure some things, but we're seeing a lot of organizations that are taking some of that offensive talent and they're plugging into, a talent pool to test these different things. And then they're using internal talent to do either strategic offensive security measures or support the remediation process.
Yeah, of course.
Right? So we see kind of a, let's get away from the adversarial security, development and IT relationship, and let's make it a little more collaborative, right?
I totally agree with you, Justin. And just to add to that, we are living in a very dynamic time, right? So on one hand, you talk about inflation, the situation of economy, and thousands and thousands of layoffs being announced. But then on the other hand, you have those hundreds and thousands of open positions that are not filling up. Why? So one way to look at it is from our perspective, hey, let's take a hybrid approach, right? So short term, you try to bring in the strategic talent and set the direction at the top. And to extend it to a little longer term, hey, let's start going to where the talent starts from. So of course you start with colleges, interns, you plug them into the SOC model, they get up to the speed, and all of a sudden you have a couple of layers of management available. But then at the same time, you have to bring some MSSPs who have that knowledge to accelerate that learning and build a process. So there are a couple of ways to address it, but you just have to approach it from both sides.
We often are looking for aptitudes and ability to process and learn and grow. I mean, when you're talking about security in general, this is an evolving industry. It's an industry of change. I mean, you can't really sit on your laurels when it comes to security. Otherwise, you're going to have, we were talking about those blind spots earlier, you're definitely going to have them. So one of the things we say is try to find people who are good to be security people and build them up and make them better and better and better at what they do, and try to get them more diverse experiences. It can be really challenging. Sort of on that note though, like, what are the kinds of roles and things that really belong in-house versus outsourced? Do you guys have any opinions about that? Maybe I'll start with you, Arvind.
So, as Justin was saying, the strategic roles, they should be sitting in-house.
I see.
So how do you understand the business, the direction business is going in, and the way technology is following the business and putting the security layer. All of this should be in-house. Right? So that's something you want to retain and continue with. Then comes the second layer of execution. Now, within execution, you want to retain the knowledge base and the talented management leaders, but at the same time, you balance with MSSP and you balance with some of the interns that are growing and learning in there. So this way, you have a decent pipeline from 6 months to 12 months to 18 months. You have continuous pipeline of talent coming in.
One of the things I say is that, as from an outsider's perspective, we are testing independently, and I'm curious if you agree about this. we can't really define what someone's assets are worth inherently. We can't really define what the business means or what it is. You know, we're pen testers. We're not whatever the company does, right, that we're testing on. And so if you can't define that for me, if you can't tell me what matters to you, I'm not really sure I can really come up with a strategy, or I'll do something, but it's not going to hit the mark, I really think. So.
Yeah, and I think it gets back to your point about like risk and understanding of risk and what's the purpose of the business, right? Because from the outside, we can do things like, this is very impactful, it has a high likelihood of being found in the wild. We can even make some judgment calls depending on like the application framework that it might be a difficult fix or it might be an easier fix. So there's some things we can tell from the outside, right? It goes back to that strategic piece. What we don't know is all of the nuance of what's the purpose of the business, what's being sunsetted, what's the strategy of that thing. Is it worth addressing you know, a thing over here versus a thing over here, right?
I want to get back a little bit to some of the politics and internal management. You know, you probably have worked with teams, both of you guys, where you have to balance people's interests. You know, the AppSec guy is going to want his budget for his projects, the physical security guy is going to want their budget for their projects, and so on and so forth. But really, at the end of the day, all of these people have to work together. We're all working towards the same goal. What are some sort of personal strategies to make everyone sort of work on the same team and not get too siloed into their own sort of thing?
I have a very specific, it's kind of, you know, crowdsourced security specific, which is we're seeing more and more organizations that are looking at holistically the security team and how it fits with development teams to actually set up programs where there's a little bit of skin in the game from the development side of the house, right? So the security team will do something like front the cost of the program, but then if the performance is there and secure coding practices are followed and you better your introduction of risk, right? You introduce less risk, that's potential funding that can go back into the development side of the house from the security team. So it's turning that kind of adversarial relationship a little bit and trying to make it a little bit more collaborative and not treating security as always the gatekeeper, but a little bit more of the enabler.
Of course,
I think of security as something, you know, a lot of people talk very fear-based about it. You got to do this or else. If we don't do this thing, everything's going to light itself on fire or whatever the issue is. But you were talking, you know, M&A and stuff like that earlier. You know, I think that security needs to be used from a position of advantage. You know, we care so much about security for our product, our service, our business, whatever it is, that we're going to make the investment and provide the transparency to the world that shows that our product is really secure, that we're not just giving lip service to this stuff. Anybody can put a sticker on something on a box and say it's secure. It's really more about what are you doing to make things secure. Really, when people are talking about security, they're not really talking about something that exists. It's more about a faith and a process, I feel.
So I'll just add to that part. You know, we had an advisory board meeting and we had a large consulting company coming and presenting on the topic of, you know, CISOs and security pieces. And there was a survey taken, and there were two key elements that were prominent why even start looking into security when you interviewed large number of organizations. And the first one that came on top was the trust of your customers in your ability to operate securely. So it doesn't matter what organizations you have, you know, your customers are relying on you to be secure, and that's where you start building those security programs and running with it. I know the olden days regulatory requirements, but they vary. Finance have a different level, healthcare have a different level, manufacturing has a really different level in defining that. So that's the first part to look at it. But the second reason was exactly that. You know, I think the trend is going to be, how do I competitively differentiate my products? How do I differentiate my services? And I cannot be the one saying, hey, I'm selling you this and we are secure because I did 100 things, right? So you really have to start doing, what folks do in financial industry. You have OCC, you have FINRA, you have other companies and other things that you need to follow to prove that, hey, I'm selling you a secured security, right?
Yeah.
Or trust me, because there is S&P rating, Moody's rating on these stats.
Yeah.
So it's the same trend that you're going to start seeing in the technology and security space. When you're selling your security products or services, they want third-party attestation.
I agree.
So you'll see a lot more of that coming in.
Yeah, we're seeing that, everywhere from supply chain all the way to cars and new features. Right now the cars are becoming more software driven than anything else. It becomes almost like a consumer focus as well, to look at it and say, well, just like any other like physical safety device, I'm considering the safety of the entire thing. Right?
Absolutely.
It's pretty interesting to see that shift happen.
One thing I really like to talk about with people, especially in businesses, is the idea of creating a culture of security. An organization where everybody from the top of the chain all the way to the person who maybe has the lowest paycheck in the entire company, that they all understand that security matters to some part in what they do. But there's kind of a challenge here, which is to get buy-in. I remember in a former life, I worked in the IT services space, and I had to start convincing people that they had to have multi-factor authentication. And I got the same kind of grief every time, which is that why do I have to get this text on my phone or enter this code or use this token or something like that?
Yeah.
It is a hassle. And it's not just things like that, asking people to take a step or two more, but it's also going to leadership who may not be that security knowledgeable and say, hey, I'm about to make a big ask. I'm about to ask for X number of dollars to buy this thing that you've never heard of before, but you really, really need it. So how do we get those non-technical people on board, or those traditional security people on board with our strategies? We want to make that new ask, because the truth is, we all know that 2023, maybe we have a good formula for strategy now, but in 2 years, we're going to have something new on the table. So any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, culturally, I think we're moving a little bit more towards the ability for people to look at, everyone has these problems, right? And it's not like necessarily like an embarrassing thing. We see it in like phishing campaigns as well, where it's like, these programs are not here to point out that you're not technical or that you're gullible, right? Like, it's to build basically like personal best practices on what are the things that we go through just in order to cover off on security and make you more secure overall. It's like we're asking a little to get a whole lot, and sometimes educating people of that fact is a little bit of a challenge, because most people see the hassle, right, and they ignore everything else.
It is challenging. That's all I have to say.
You kind of have to be a little bit of a people person too. It's very easy to say to somebody, you got to do it, you got to do it, you got to do it. But someone will say, you know what, I really don't have to do it. I haven't been doing it my entire life, and I'm not going to start now. It's an argument I have with my father all the time with his computer, but
Well, and I see some security people like leading from the front in some instances, right? Where they try to set an example. But it's like, this is something that I struggle with as a security person, right? And here's why I do it, right? Because these are the pieces that come into play. And I think it's a little bit of an education, and it's a little bit of like humility, honestly, coming from the security group to say, we all have to go through this together.
So I agree with the education part big time. That's what we are experiencing. If you look at the organization structure, normally you have the front office, the revenues coming in, you have the back office supporting the revenue. But do they understand each other's language? Do they understand what matters to one versus the other? And how do they communicate with that, right? So one way to tackle that is you got to simplify and educate people so succinctly that the language you are using is consistent across both parts of the world. That's why I came up with those 3 R that, hey, rapidly respond and recover from incident, tell me one business guy that will say, no, I don't want to invest in it, or I'm not interested, right?
Yeah.
And the risk-based security, tell me one technical guy who will say, no, we shouldn't focus on this, right? And attack surface, which CEO would want their companies to have so many security defects for people to walk in?
Yeah.
None. So you got to simplify, you got to make the language so easy that anybody can understand, and they have to say yes.
Totally.
And then you build the layers of what are the objectives for each pillar, what are the initiatives that'll go in, and then you start executing in KPI.
Yeah.
So now you have a full stack of the spectrum, right from the business leader to the technology leader to security practitioner. Why are we doing what we are doing from the business side?
Yeah, I'm increasingly convinced every year that goes by that the ability to translate for security people is even more important.
Exactly.
Absolutely,
right?
100%.
To be able to educate the business on what the business impact is, right? And then go to engineering or IT teams and educate them from a technical perspective what that means for them.
What that means,
right?
And they're not doing it on purpose. You know, it's how, when I was an engineer, the only thing that I was worried about is, hey, we'll get breached. I did not have the concept of what exactly the business is running on, how are we making the revenue, which pieces are critical, and how they're connected. So you need those brokers who understand the business language, have the technology background, and then marry the two together to move the organization forward, right?
It's a really difficult conversation with a security person to say, there's such a thing as acceptable risk, right? Like,
well, I mean, nothing is...
That's a hard pill to swallow.
Nothing is foolproof. I mean, nothing is foolproof. If you have a threat actor who wants to invest enough time and resources to break something, they can probably break it. I really liked what you said about simplicity, too. It made me think of some of my experiences here at RSA, honestly. You know, there are amazing products in the vendor hall with some really smart people who develop them. And one thing I wish some of the salespeople who might grab you in the hall might say is, I might say to them, like, hey, you know, rather than talk to me about every last thing about your product that's so good from a technical perspective, let's get to the point. Let's cut to the chase. What is this thing doing that is making a difference to my security? How is this protecting me better? And we can get into the technical reasons why this happens later. You know, I'm not so important about it, but I need to know if this is even the right type of thing for my organization in the first place. So I don't quite understand sometimes why people do that.
Can I get the AI ML technology on the blockchain in a single pane of glass?
Yeah, guess what?
Is that possible?
But you know, when you're a decision maker, you might be on that floor listening to this stuff. And you've got a couple minutes to get your point across. You may have a solution that really fits the client's needs, but unless they really understand quickly what it does for you, I think it's just going to fall off, and you're not going to be able to make that connection.
Yeah. Well, and I think it goes back a little bit to the business too, right? Which is like, it's a technological solution. But being able to communicate that and then tying it back to the business and how it helps the business.
Yeah, that's the hard part.
Right, like I think that's a one step that we, as on the vendor side, we miss quite a bit, right?
Well, security really is all about choices, ultimately. We have all of these decisions we have to make. Where do we put our money? Where do we put our time? Where do we put our energy? What people do we hire? Who's outsourced? So on and so forth. How do you go to sleep at night knowing that you took a reasonable approach? Because obviously we don't want perfect to be the enemy of the good, so to speak. We want to sort of know that we took a reasonable approach. What do you do when you're responsible for these decisions to sort of feel confident in what you did? Or is it maybe wrong to feel confident? Maybe you should have a little uncertainty about it. I mean, do you have any thoughts about that?
I just take melatonin every night.
Yeah, well, you know, that could help, you know, a beer or two might do something for you, I don't know.
So I think having that methodical approach is really critical.
Yeah.
You know, so that's number one. You got to have a framework that you can refer to, and it doesn't matter what framework you use. You can go NIST, identify, detect, protect, respond, recover, but that has to be consistent when you work with your business leader and when you work with your technology leader. Why? Because, you know, you alone as a security leader is responsible, but you have the help and support you need from both ends, right? So if you speak the same language and the business is agreeing to the risk in those different areas, and the technology guys understand, hey, this is what our limitation, I think you have sort of reached a middle ground where hopefully you don't need the medicine anymore, right?
Yeah.
You just have that law of land.
The framework and the ability to have everyone on the same page with this is the framework, this is how we categorize risk, this is what our current risk is, this is the direction that we're going, right? If we're doing the translation appropriately, right, so everyone's on that same page, then we're doing the best that we can, right? And we all agree that we're doing the best that we can. Right? And I think that's kind of what I see. Well,
before we wrap up and I give you guys a chance to tell people how to reach you, I wanted to sort of wrap this up in a little bit. What's one thing that people should be doing or doing better? You know, get on your soapbox and evangelize for something. Tell me something that people should be doing today that they maybe could be doing better, maybe that you see out in the world that really could make a difference to most organizations. Why don't I start with you, Justin?
Yeah, I mean, again, like laundry list of things to pick. I mean, for me, and this is fully on my soapbox, I tend to have a problem with, or not even a problem, but in the current space, especially in application security, doing things for the sake of compliance and because you have to, as opposed to taking alternate paths to actually chase the risk. You know, new innovative methods that may not align directly with like a PCI, you know, audit, for example, but allows you to gain more skill sets, find more vulnerabilities. If the purpose of a compliance framework is to make you this good at security, and you find something that makes you this good, like that should suffice.
Exactly.
But we're still in that figuring it out phase on the crowdsource side, for us to be able to kind of convey that accurately and appropriately, where that can be looked at as an augment, you know, to your security program.
The compliance people have no insight into your business. They just have a checklist of things that they want to do. Now, it's not to say that there isn't value, but it's just not going to necessarily speak directly to you. So I think that's a really good point. How about you?
So I would say, you know, we have 3R strategy, but the focus should be 3 Bs, right?
Ben. I get it. All right.
I would say be brilliant at basics.
I love it.
That's it. So just be brilliant at inventorying what you have. If you don't know what you have, what are you securing? Right? Be brilliant at finding the known security defects in your infrastructure. You know, forget about advanced threats and advanced program. If you're not able to fix those known security defects, what's the point? Right? And then be brilliant at finding your sensitive data, because that's what most attackers will come after, right? So if you don't know where that data is, how will you start building the program? So, you know, so I would say be brilliant at basics, do the inventory pieces, find your security defects, make sure what data matters to you, and lastly, don't trust yourself alone. Right? So you got to go outside of the organization, have a third party validate what you're doing, have a third party give you a different perspective, have a third party verify that, hey, what you did, is it effective?
I definitely agree with that part. As, you know, we do independent pen testing, and I couldn't agree more that you just do need those outside opinions. Well, thank you so much, guys. Before we wrap up, I want to give you both a chance to sort of tell people how to reach you. Justin, you want to start?
Justin.beachler@bugcrowd.com.
Cool.
Feel free to reach out. Any questions in AppSec, crowdsource security, pen testing. We do some attack surface stuff. Just again, all kind of built on the foundation of being plugged into a variety of kind of the most amazing security talents around the world, and just bringing those to bear against your environment.
Awesome.
Great.
Anything you want to promote?
So just LinkedIn.
LinkedIn.
You know, hey, just arvindbansal1@gmail.com, and just reach out for anything in security. You know, I've spent a decade and a half purely doing security. I truly enjoy what I do,
I can tell.
And I love to share my learnings with the community.
Yeah.
So for anything and everything, just reach out.
Awesome. Well, if you're enjoying this conversation, you want to learn more, you can check out ITSP Magazine. You can check out our podcast, Tech Done Different. My name's Ben Schmerler. You can find me on LinkedIn. It's Schmerler. I know it's a really difficult name to spell. I also work for independent security evaluators. You can check us out at ise.io. Guys, thanks again. Really appreciate you guys joining me. This is a great conversation. I'm so grateful we could have it.
Yeah.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, and thank you.